It all started in the summer of 2013, where I got the tremendous opportunity to go to Europe. My high school always has this European club where they take the students in the club to beautiful places in Europe, such as Paris, London, Italy, and even more. Although they only allowed seniors and juniors to join the club, and I was just a sophomore at the time. Somehow, there wasn't enough students who joined the club that year, so that one time they let sophomores have the opportunity to join the club as well. I jumped at this opportunity as soon as I found out about it. I had always dreamt about going to Europe, and my dream was going to turn into a reality. The first thing I did was went home and told my parents, and my mom was so excited because she loves traveling, so she right away agreed to let me go on the trip, as long as she could come too, of course. So at the moment, I knew I was really going to turn my dreams into reality. I went to school the next day and joined the European Club. I started going to all of the meetings and planning all the details and places we were going this year. I found out the places that we were going to travel were to London, Paris, Germany, and Switzerland. I was so excited at this point. Everything was just becoming more realistic. London and Paris were also some of the places that I had fantasized about going to, so it was just a very amazing feeling. Honestly, it took a lot of hard work and time to get everything prepared for this big trip. We had to fundraise, so there was a lot of bake sales, dinners, and raffles, but in the end, all of my hard work paid off. I finally had all my hotel rooms paid for, plane flight tickets, and all of the expenses paid for. I was ready to get on the plane and head off to Europe. Finally, I was on the plane and on my way to London. This plane ride felt like it was forever, although it was really gorgeous because I had never been to another country on a plane. So it was a little scary as we left all of North America and we were just flying over the Atlantic Ocean to Europe. And there was blue waters everywhere. I couldn't see any land at all, so it was just a big blue pool of water beneath me, and I just had to trust that we were going to make it across safely. Fortunately, we did. Our plane ride was smooth the whole 11 hours, and before I knew it, we were getting ready to land. Our plane landed, and we were in London. As I walked out of the airport and saw the huge and beautiful city of London, I was just in awe. I couldn't believe I was in London or in another country. The air was fresh, the sky was blue, and there was just people everywhere. Our first day in London, we just got everything settled into our hotel, then began exploring the beautiful city. We toured on those big red London double-decker buses, where a Londoner showed us all that London has to offer, passing all the lovely architecture that London has to offer, such as the London Eye, Big Ben, and the red old telephones. After that tour, we finally got to walk around London and find our own way around London. We started in the heart of London, which is Piccadilly Circus, where there are shopping malls, restaurants, and shows. I was so overwhelmed with everything in this place. I didn't even know where to start. So I started checking out the stores, the amusing street shows with the man on a unicycle juggling and the people playing music. I finally found a nice little cafe where I just sat and took everything all in. Being in a different country, all the different types of people from all over the world, the scenery, and the amazing feeling I felt. The next day in London, we went to see the Buckingham Palace. It had gorgeous architecture and it was gigantic. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. I remember seeing the Victoria Memorial with the lovely golden angels and all the Queen's soldiers guarding her palace. The soldiers were completely still and wouldn't even move when I took a picture with one. Towards the end of the day, we went to take a ride on the London Eye. The line was huge and it took forever to reach the top of it. We finally were there at the top of the line and getting on the ride. It was like riding a huge Ferris wheel that gave you a whole view of London. As I was going in circles on the London Eye, I remember looking out of the view of the whole city and the sunset behind all the buildings. This was such a breathtaking scenery. We then went to eat dinner, which of course we ate fish and chips. It's a London specialty. Our final day in London, we got to explore all of London by ourselves and get any last-minute shopping done. So I went with my mom on the metro stations, and this is where we ran into Big Ben, which was extremely tall. When I stood next to it, I felt so little. We looked at the London Bridge that was so lovely with all the detail it had on it. The final stop we made was in the Hard Rock Cafe in London, because my mom and I have this tradition of buying Hard Rock t-shirts in every new place that we travel. This Hard Rock Cafe was jam-packed, and we couldn't figure out why, so we asked the cashier, which she informed us that this was the very first Hard Rock Cafe ever made. After we finished with everything that day, it was time to go to our next country, which was Paris. To travel to Paris, we needed to go on a train that we went under the ocean. I was super tired that day, and it was a rainy day in London, which we made it to the train, and this ride only took 2 hours to get to Paris, and I slept the whole entire way. I was super exhausted with all the time change from the United States to Europe. As I woke up as soon as we got to Paris, and I remember watching the buildings in Paris as we passed by them on the train ride. Some buildings had graffiti, and the graffiti was in French. I remember thinking how neat and interesting that was. I was off the train finally and in Paris. It was so unbelievable to just go from one country in Europe to a whole other country in just a matter of days. As I walked out of the train and got onto our bus, I was just looking out the window, looking at all of Paris as we passed it by. Everything was still sinking in as I got settled into my hotel in Paris, and this was a complete different place because in London, the people at least spoke English, but in Paris, everyone spoke French and very little English. I wanted to turn on the TV. I went to turn on the TV, and even the TV was in French. So then I felt like I was in another world. I had never experienced being somewhere where you don't know what anyone else is saying around you. We then started to explore the lovely city of Paris. It was cool because in Paris I didn't have to drive anywhere. We walked everywhere and took the metro station. We walked and looked at all the little shops next to the sidewalk, which was where I got most of my souvenirs. As I walked past this building and looked to my left, I remember seeing it peeking from the top. It was the Eiffel Tower. I walked toward it and stood in the middle of the outlook place where you could see the Eiffel Tower from afar. The sunset hit it just perfectly. As I was looking at it, it was something from a dream. I couldn't tell if it was real because it looked so dreamlike and even more beautiful than I imagined. We walked all the way to the Eiffel Tower to where I was standing right next to it. I felt like an ant standing next to it. It never looked so big in the pictures, I thought. We finally started going to the top of the Eiffel Tower, which took forever to get there in the elevator because it was so tall. The elevator finally came to a stop, and we were inside the Eiffel Tower at the very top of it. I walked straight to the railing and looked over. As I leaned over the railing, I was just breathtaken by the beauty of Paris. It was sunset at this point, so the sun set on the whole city turned into lights from all of the buildings. I felt like I was on top of the world, looking over everyone and everything. The next day in Paris, we went to see Notre Dame and the Louvre, and the Lovelock Bridge. We took a boat ride first, rode around in Paris. Then we came to a stop where we went to the Notre Dame Cathedral. I loved just the outside of the cathedral. It was so detailed with medieval architecture. Although the inside was even more detailed, it had candles and amazing stained glass windows. We then went to the Louvre. I remember it being huge as I walked through the Louvre, admiring all the lovely paintings and art. I was just so taken in by it, especially with the Mona Lisa. The painting was everything I imagined it to be. There were so many paintings that I just got lost in. Our final place was the Lovelock Bridge. I had been waiting for this bridge. I even brought my own lock to put on it. There were millions of locks, and mine was just one to the collection. I wanted to leave a piece of me in Paris. And that was our last day in Paris, and our next stop was Switzerland. To travel to Switzerland, we had to go on a bus all the way over there. The bus ride was extremely long. It was 11 hours, although we did make a lot of neat stops in France on our way out. We stopped in this one little town with shops, bakeries, and restaurants. This is where I tasted my first escargot, and it wasn't as bad as I anticipated. I actually really liked it. After that, we were back on the road, and after a long 11 hours, we finally arrived in Switzerland. I looked out of the bus window, and everything was so green and lush. I was so astonished by all the greenery everywhere. I had never seen anything so green and healthy. It was gorgeous. There were just hills of green all over, and barely any buildings. We then came to a stop in a little city called Lucerne. This was an adorable city because there was not too many buildings and it was really compact. I walked through the town and took in all the cultures that Switzerland had to offer. The first thing I tried was the Switzerland chocolate, which just melted in my mouth. I bought a ton of chocolate to take home. The next thing I looked at was the Switzerland knives and watches. I bought some knives for friends and family. They had so many different types of them. After going through this town, our next stop was to go to the Switzerland Alps. In order to get to the Alps, we needed to travel through boat. So we took a boat ride across Lake Lucerne. This boat ride was beautiful with all the mountains surrounding me. And as I passed the houses that are built on the sides of the mountains, I got to see all of Lucerne from this boat ride. We then arrived at the cogwheel train that takes you to the highest peaks of the Swiss Alps. So I got on the train and it began going up the hill. I looked out of the window and there was adorable Switzerland cows with bells hanging on their necks. And the hills were so green and I had a gorgeous scenery of the Switzerland Alps. I could see the snow resting on the very top and all the rocky edges packed with snow. There was also this huge cloud surrounding the mountain. It looked like a picture. We finally made it to the top of the peak of the mountain, where there was nothing but snow. I was cold from all the snow and the cold breeze that hit my face. Despite all of that, I couldn't get over the beauty of being at the top of the mountain. It was almost as if I left Switzerland and I entered another place. I began exploring a mountain as I walked down this path and saw a cave, so I went in it. This then led me to another side of the mountain where it was more open and white everywhere. This side was extremely foggy. I could barely see anything, just white, fluffy clouds surrounding me. I felt like I was on one big white cloud floating through the sky, and I was so high up in the air. This mountain was absolutely breathtaking, but it was time to leave and go get ready to pack up for our next journey. Our time in Switzerland came to an end, and it was time to get ready for a journey to Germany. To get to Germany, we traveled by bus. This took some while to get there, but it was definitely worth it. As we finally arrived in Germany, I was so excited. Zurich, Germany was such a gorgeous city. There was so much culture and the buildings were very unique. The first day in Germany, we just went to explore the city and shop around the city. As I walked in the stores, they were huge and so different from America. The people in Germany were huge as well. They were so tall, I felt really small compared to them. I just walked around the plaza area and took in this beautiful place. The next day, we went to see the Cinderella Castle. We drove to this beautiful place with the castle at the top of the mountain. It was so lovely how it was resting on top of the mountain with the trees surrounding it. I began walking towards the castle through this trail that was 3 miles long. Although the walk did not bother me at all, I loved the nature and trees that surrounded me. I felt like I was in a jungle with all the greenery. It was amazing. I finally arrived at the top of the mountain, and it was a workout, but definitely worth it. I walked inside the castle, and it was so big inside. Everything was ancient and had so much detail, from the bedrooms to the dining rooms and the hundreds of rooms it had. It amazed me how old this castle was and made me think of the people who used to live there. I loved being in this place. I felt like I was time traveling in that era where the castle was made. I was experiencing how they lived in that day and age, and it was mind-blowing. The next day, and the final day in Germany, we went to see the Holocaust camp in Auschwitz. As I walked in the camp, I felt such a bad vibe from the whole place. It gave off a really bad aura. When I was walking through the camp, I saw all the little huts in which these people were forced to live in. There was no bed inside, no mattress, just wood boards to sleep on. I was so saddened by the living environments that they were forced to endure. Next, I went to see the gas chambers. I first entered the locker room where they were forced all the people to undress, and then was a door to the gas chamber. As I walked in the gas chamber, it broke my heart to be put in their position and feel what those people felt. I broke into tears as I stood there feeling their pain, all of the innocent men, women, and children that died there in that spot. I could not even imagine the torture that they endured, and they didn't even know what they did wrong. I could still smell the odor of bodies in the air. It was such a dark place, filled with anguish and agony. That was the last place I went in Germany, and my whole trip came to an end in Germany as well. It was time to get back on the plane and head back to the United States. As I was on the plane going back, it made me think how I was never really looking at the world, and I was just walking around with my eyes closed. This trip made me see the world from a whole other perspective. Now my eyes are open to what the world is and what other places it has to offer. I know that there is so much more out there, and every place has a different experience and a different story to tell in its own unique way. From exploring London and riding on the double-decker buses, to being at the very top of the Eiffel Tower and watching the beautiful city of Paris, then to Switzerland and climbing all of the caves of the mountain, to walking in the concentration camps and feeling the pain of the people tortured. Each experience had its own story to tell in its own unique way. I know that this is an experience that everyone should have because life is too short not to see the world. You never know what tomorrow brings or what is in store for you. Every day should be lived like there is no tomorrow, with no regrets. Just live life to the fullest.